Ladies and escorts, Andy here, day 253 of the Inner Winner Show. This is the one a lot of you have been waiting for. This is my interview with Georgie Wolf, who is a podcaster, an author, a sex educator, and I know the thing you dirty pervs are most interested in, she's an escort. So a bunch of you gave me a bunch of questions to ask her. We went through all of those questions. She told me some amazingly interesting stories, including an 83-year-old guy, I think he was 83, I think he was 80-something, who, and I quote her, fucked my brains out. You guys are going to love that story. And we went on a really, really, really long rant about like a bunch of different topics. I think you guys will really like this interview. Georgie very much talks like me, so she's very crass like me. If you go and listen to her podcast, which I definitely advise you guys listen to, she talks exactly like me. She talks about the same sort of concepts, getting laid. She literally calls it getting laid. Yeah, guys, there's a woman out there that calls this stuff getting laid just like us. I think you guys will like this a lot. I'll shut up now. Watch the interview. I'm going to admit right now, we'll probably keep this in the podcast. I'm too much of a pussy to like ever actually choke anyone. So I just do a pretend version where you just like hold your hand there and kind of squeeze a little, but you just like have it there. And like, maybe you squeeze a little bit, but I'm too scared to go like, because like when someone's in the middle of moaning, you can't tell if it's like, especially because when you get choked out, like from a blood choke where you're squeezing on the sides, you just kind of like, all of a sudden you're asleep. And like, that's my biggest fear is like,
fast.
Yeah. And so like, how do I know? Like my biggest fear is that I'll choke someone out and they'll literally be asleep. So I just don't even go close to that. I'm just like gently squeezing.
Pretty full on. The best tip I ever got was from a professional dominatrix. And she says, you put one hand here and you grab the back of their neck and then you pull the back of their neck towards you. And it feels like you're constricting them, but you're actually not, because all the places you're touching them are pretty solid.
You can do like the same with like a backwards choke. I do that a lot, especially during sex. Like you grab the back of the neck and squeeze it, and then you're not anywhere
like the meaty bit.
Yeah. And you're just kind of like pushing on the back and
unless
squeezing.
You've got really big hands, in which case.
Yeah, I got little dainty hands.
So you're fine. Very useful.
Thank you.
Sorry,
I appreciate it. I forgot to ask you. Are you okay with the video being used in this, or do you want me to just?
Yeah, totally fine. Yeah. Especially now that we've discovered the face smoothing feature.
Okay. I feel like I should ramp mine up, but people will say like, why is your face like this? What have you done? Like, I tell you what.
Away from that. What?
Yeah, that's my trick, because if you get too close. Anyway, I went on a podcast, so did Imogen, with this lady. Her name is Haley Hoverston, and she runs a YouTube channel called Your Guide to Love. And like, if you're interested, I would love to like connect you, because she was like interesting as hell. And I feel like you're going to talk to her and be like, this is like one and the same. Like she's like, she talks the same way we do. She's like absolutely on board. Like, but she's like more like hippie than us, like more spiritual. And so I think you'll like that part of it too. But she's like super chill.
But a lot of my friends are big fat hippies, and I love them. But sometimes I try and bring it back a little bit back to the blokey end of things, because that's not me.
I do that too.
But I still love it. I love talking to them, and finding your people. It's so nice, isn't it? It's a nice feeling.
I know. I wish I'd done it earlier, honestly. Like, it's something I've started doing the last like 3 months or so, like reaching out to people. And Imogen's been great. She's been doing that for me. And
super fresh too. She's great.
Yeah, she's a little fucking awesome chick. I had a better sentence than that, but that would do.
When I said that there are a few things I disagreed with and sort of opened up that conversation, her reply back in terms of boundaries was so spot on. It was so good and so non-confrontational. Like, it was absolutely perfect.
I mean, I guess we could talk about boundaries. That's like, I should pass this over to you, because I feel like you're more of the expert on some of these things. But like, boundaries is something that she had to like figure out, and we had to like learn together. And like, I wish she was here right now. Like, maybe we can talk about this when we come on your podcast. But like,
this is going to happen. Yeah, boundaries.
She had to learn boundaries. She had to learn boundaries. I had to kind of teach her, and it was weird teaching someone. Like, essentially, you're teaching them, I want you to be able to say no to me. But I feel like that's an important part of like, if you're the dominant guy, like especially with more submissive or shy, girls, you want to be able to say, if you don't like something, you have to tell me. And she really struggled, because she had a lot of, I won't get too much into details if she's not here, but like based on her childhood, she had like ideas of like, I want to please my father and I don't ever want to be a disappointment to him. And so to me as well, she was like, I don't ever want to say no to you, because you'll get disappointed. And I had to basically
sometimes
teach her.
Not saying no is disappointing. What if you do something to someone they don't like and they don't tell you? That'd be a betrayal in my book. Like, that's worse than having someone say no to me.
Okay, we're definitely going to have to call this part of the podcast then, because I do want to talk about. I do want to talk about this. Like, that notion of like people talk about trust in a dominant, like submissive, dom sub relationship coming from the dominant person, but you also need to be able to trust the submissive person. Like if you're going to be doing these like crazy things or sometimes crazy things to someone, you need to trust that they have boundaries and that they will say no, because I think this doesn't get talked about enough. When you go over that line, or maybe you get close to that line and like you're really close to it, you're obviously hurting the submissive person. You don't mean to, but like, that can become, I don't want to put anyone off, but like it can become like traumatizing, mildly traumatizing, right?
You need
but
to get it just right, because too much can be traumatizing. This is why kink is so dangerous, because you're treading that fine line between this is amazing and holy shit, this is terrible. Yeah. That's what makes it so hot.
Exactly. When you go over that line, though, it can also be traumatizing for the person who did it. And I think that doesn't get talked about enough. Like the dominant person, they need to feel trust as well.
This is totally a thing that's super important to talk about. And I don't know if this is the podcast or should
we'll just call this the podcast.
We...
let's just call this the podcast. I do an intro afterwards anyway, so we'll just call this
great. We'll end up using up all our good material in chit chat.
Again.
Mm-hmm. Right. So but tell me where you're coming from around, because we were talking about like boundaries, and we're talking about rejection. Yeah. And obviously all this stuff is super important. What do you need, your people need to know? What do you feel like is important to your listeners
in terms of boundaries and stuff like that? I feel like
boundaries.
I think the thing guys need to know the most is like how to communicate, because I feel like there's this like chasm between like the man and the woman, or a dominant and a submissive. But let's just say a man and a woman. I think most of my audience don't use BDSM terms, but they do want to try BDSM stuff. And so there's this like communication gap. I talked about this on the podcast I went on with the Haley lady that I just told you about. We talked a bunch about communication, and I think guys get this template, and they get it from porn mostly, of like, you're not supposed to talk, or you're like breaking the magic. You should just like shut up and just not say anything and know what it's. If you go and watch porn, if you just go and pick any random porn video, and I want you guys listening to this right now, and girls like listening to this right now, go and try this. Go and just watch like 5 videos on Pornhub. Just pick 5 random videos. And what you will find is, now that I've pointed it out to you, you'll be very aware of this, and you go, holy shit, they don't say anything to each other. They don't talk. They don't say, does that feel good? You're turning me on. You're so hot. You're so sexy. They don't say anything. They don't say, I love that. Harder, softer. They don't say anything. It's just like both parties are not saying anything.
Is that not weird to you? How do they even know what to do? And the reason they know is because they've pre-negotiated, but you don't see that pre-negotiation unless you go to kink.com, which is awesome. And if you watch kink.com stuff, they actually shoot a little segment at the beginning with the chick where they're like, hey, so here's what I think you're doing today. You into that? And she's like, yeah, that sounds hot. Any boundaries? Oh, yeah, I'm not really into X. And they actually show that conversation. But regular porn, they have the conversation off camera. So you think that they're just going for it. But actually, they've had this really detailed chat about boundaries, really professional chat, right? Because porn performers are professionals. They don't just gung-ho it in there and slap some lube on and go for it.
Yeah, I wish that got talked about more. I wish that was shown more even, because
I wish we could see it.
Yeah. And like you're talking about having an actual conversation. Like some people will hear that and be like, great, that suits me. That's a personality type of like having a designated like hardcore conversation first. Other guys don't like to do that. They're like, oh, that's weird. I can't do that. So for those guys, if you absolutely don't want to do that, and I'm someone that like, okay, that's not true. I do have a conversation. That's not true. Usually in the bar, like before we go back, I say like, what are you into? What have you tried? Like that kind of
Best
stuff.
Best foreplay ever, by the way.
Yeah, it is. No, oh my God. And that's so that's what I would say.
In, you're like, so what are you into? What have you done?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and it's so much fun to say stuff. And you're both, especially anyone listening who's like nervous about trying this stuff, like it's almost really fun being nervous, because like you kind of just like, you get really close to saying what you want to say, but you don't want to say like, have you ever been tied up? So you kind of just say like, what stuff have you done in the bedroom? And she'll be shy as well. So she'll be like, well,
it's so cute.
It is. It's like you said, it's foreplay. It really is. And then by the time you get back, your imagination has just gone crazy. You've been thinking about like, should we do these things? I talk about this a lot. Writing a sexual bucket list is a really good way to cover like kinks. Like you go away and you write down like 100 things you want to try, and you send a text, or you just have that conversation in person with whoever you're seeing, and you say like, yo, you go write your bucket list, and we'll kind of like see what like maybe some of the things on your list I never would have thought about. And maybe some of the things on my list you never would have thought about. And we'll see where the crossover is, like where those two Venn diagrams cross over. And then next time we meet, let's try like two things from the list. And every time you meet, you pick like two or three things. You talk about it first, or you don't have to if you don't want to, whatever. But like you meet, you get into it, you see what you like, you take it slow, you play around with that stuff. That's probably the easiest way I've ever found of like exploring kinks, is like you literally say, what are you into? I say what I'm into. You make it fun because it's like a bucket list.
Hot.
It is.
And it's actually a website that does this. I can't remember what it's called. There's a website where you both log on separately and you tick all the different activities that you're interested in, and it only shows you the ones that you've both ticked on. So you could totally say I'm into ass to mouth or something full on, and your partner will never know unless they tick that they're into the same thing.
I need to know this website because I'm going to do an article on that. Like, that's amazing if that exists.
I'll find it and send it to you if it's still around. Do. It's really cool because then you don't have to, it's really hard to sit your partner down and say, honey, I'm actually just really into like forced chastity, or I'm really into.
I want you to step on my elbows. I want you to
put me in an adult diaper. Yeah, all that stuff. But of course, if it only shows you things you're both interested in,
I like that.
Then you don't have to worry about getting outed.
Well, I tell you what I've found is like, I say this all the time. Like, I will send a text to someone and say, like, you go write your bucket list. And what I always keep in mind is that first list is not the real list. It's like the list that they're saying that they don't want to be too embarrassed about. They'll put like some stuff on there that's a little bit kinky.
Yeses.
And so I either have to volunteer something a little kinky, or we kind of have to both keep escalating, or we have to have that conversation, which I have anyway, where I say, like, literally nothing you put on the list I will judge. I swear to God, like, you have to trust me. I give some examples. I'll give crazy examples of stuff that like other people
share your own
like,
stuff.
Yeah. And then you say, so like the worst case scenario is I will tell you that I'm not into that, but I won't judge you. And maybe I'll even like show you how you can go and try that with someone else if that's what you want to do. Like, that conversation seems to then get them to write a second bucket list with some like actual, like real stuff that they really want to talk about. Like, the really kinky stuff. Yeah. Because people do have like two entirely different lists. I think you have the list that you're kind of okay with most people hearing, and then the actual list of stuff that maybe you haven't even really admitted to yourself.
And it depends on the person too. There are some things I love doing with people I've picked up off Tinder. There are some things I would only ever do with established partners. And there's some things I would only do with very experienced dominants. And there's some shit that you just shouldn't be doing unless you're super experienced and you have the trust, which is why I was talking about not tying people up. Like, if I meet someone on a first date and they say, I'm a super experienced dom, let's go home and I'll tie you up, I'll be like, no, you're not a super experienced dom, because an experienced dom knows that tying someone up when you've just met them is super dangerous and they'll never offer it. So stuff like that. Whereas it'll be like, hey, let's go home and try some spanking. That'll be fun. And then after we've been going out for a while, it's like, oh, so, have you tried bondage? Do you want to try something really straightforward and easy? And then if it's someone who knows their shit, I'm like, hey, do you want to kick this shit out of me? That'd be great fun. Let's negotiate that. But that's very high level stuff. And I wouldn't do it with anyone unless I'd already played with them and established the trust.
Do you find it kind of annoying? Like, annoying is not the right word, but like, there is a part of me that's like, I wish other people could I wish I could do a podcast for like only the advanced guys, like guys who know what they're talking about, advanced women, advanced guys who've like done this a bunch of times. And so they know, like, okay, I know how to read body language. I know how to have safe words. I know how to say, like, are you having fun? Is this okay? I know when a rope is too tight. I know that. I wish I could talk to those people, and maybe you feel the same, because when you talk to like just the whole audience, you have to like coat everything in these, like, and don't do this and this and this. Like, you have to add caveats, and you have to like give all these extra things.
But to be honest, like, I've met experienced people, or people who self-identified as experienced, who needed a bit of a tune-up, frankly. And we all need a bit of a tune-up. So it's nice to keep emphasizing consent and keep talking about, like, you're having the conversation. What do you do if someone calls it red? What do you do if you get rejected? Because I've met some really experienced people who didn't have all their bases covered with regards to that stuff.
What do you talk about when you say like rejected? Like, what, are they getting upset that they got rejected? Like, do you mean rejected for a kink?
So I'll tell you a story. I love going to kink clubs now.
Okay, that's something I want to do at some point. That's something I want to do at some point.
So much fun. But it's great because when I was younger and I went to kink clubs, I didn't really know what I was doing, and I was submissive. I'm not now. I'm more of a switch. I can top people or bottom. But at the time, I was like, oh, anyone that comes up to me and says stuff, I need to be polite. I need to do what they say, and I was all like, oh. And now, becoming a sex worker, like, you say no to people all the time. I've gotten so good at it.
You have to, yeah.
I love going to kink clubs and saying no to people, because you'll get people coming up that are doing the dom thing where they're like, hello, I've very experienced Mr. Dom. And I'm like, are you? And they're like, let me show you my impressive thing to beat people with. And I'm like, dude, why don't you just have a conversation with me as a person and say, hey, you seem interesting. Where are you from? What are you into? Like, why launch straight into the sales pitch, mate? And then I get the sales pitch politely, and I listen politely to the sales pitch, and they're like, so should we go upstairs? And I'm like, no, thank you. And I walk away, and the look on their face is fucking priceless. And I'm like, yes, you need to learn to hear no. And it doesn't matter how experienced we are, how much sex we have normally, how much we pick up. We need to know how to hear no, because it's going to happen all the time. And not being able to hear it, you look really silly, especially if you've just told someone how experienced you are and then they politely say no to you and then you can't hack it. Like,
you see the same thing. I know you used this word last time, pickup artists. You see the same thing with guys who've just started learning from pickup artists and stuff. Maybe they've had a little bit of success, and all of a sudden they get to a point where, and I get this point, I was in this point too, so I can't even criticize it, but it's like you get to a point where you're like trying too hard, and like every girl you talk to, it's like you have a little bit of confidence, or maybe even arrogance, but let's just call it confidence and be charitable. You have a bit of confidence because you've had some success. You've met some women, you've had some sex, you've gotten laid. Yeah, you kind of know what you're doing a little bit, but you still care like a hell of a lot. And so you're really invested and you're trying really hard and you're giving these like sales pitches, like you said, and you can't take rejection at all. So you'll walk up super confident, Mr. like trying to show off, you'll have all your pickup lines and all this kind of stuff, hey, you'd be lucky to suck my dick, and like that kind of, that kind of vibe. You're not directly saying that stuff, although some guys do. And then she says, no.
Work for some people.
It does sometimes, but you get really butthurt. These guys get really butthurt. And again, I was in this stage myself. I went through this stage. What I find is like once you get to a point where you're happy with your sexuality, you're happy with your self-improvement, you're happy with how many times you've gotten laid, like all this kind of stuff. You know the process. It's just about meeting people, seeing if you click with them. It's not this big whole like David versus Goliath battle. Like every time I walk up to a woman, I have to like conquer her and win. Once you can kind of pull yourself out of that mindset and just say like, no, I'm just going to see if she likes me because I think she looks attractive. We'll see if we like each other. If so, cool. Once you get to that point, it's almost like you stop trying as hard, and that's more attractive. And you're not even doing it intentionally. Yeah, it's like you just don't care anymore if they say no. You're like, yeah, cool. Like lots of people don't like me. It's like you've been rejected enough times. I'm sure you've been rejected thousands of times. And at this point, you're just like, yeah, you're like, well, 1,000 people don't like me. That's fine. You didn't like me either. That's fine. I don't like everyone. But you kind of have to go through. It's almost like a necessary. I think it's a necessary phase. Yeah, like
I have a phrase for this that I've invented.
Go.
It's called rejection resilience. This is what I call it, because it's inevitable that you're going to be rejected because we're not designed to fit with everyone, right? If we did, if you could walk up to anyone, well, it would suck, because how would you know they actually liked you? Like, what if everyone fucked you? This is why celebrities turn into alcoholics, because everyone wants to fuck you. And after a while, you don't even know if they're fucking you because they actually like you.
Yeah, and if they just want your money. Yeah.
Or if they just want your money. So like, we're not designed to be able to fuck everyone, which means that you're going to hear no. It's inevitable. And what we need to do, it's like a muscle, you've got to flex that rejection muscle, because getting rejected fucking sucks and it really hurts. But you've got to, the more it happens, the more you can not like harden up, but the more you can be like, oh, okay, going to pick myself up. I know it's not personal. Off we go again, resilience, just sort of keeping on going. And I feel like you can't get there without experiencing it. Like you said, like you can't just be like, rejection isn't going to bother me. You actually have to go through the painful process of getting rejected and then sitting with that feeling for yourself,
Yeah. And not putting it on the other person. I'm sure you've encountered this as well, where someone will get rejected and then they're like, well, why did she reject me? She's a bitch. And it's like, I mean, if that makes you feel better, sure. Like I said that to myself, quite a while to make myself feel better, but it doesn't ultimately make you feel better. It's just, you have to get to a point where you're like, either I haven't put enough effort into my, my confidence, my attractiveness, my looks, whatever it is, my self-improvement, I'm still fat, whatever, any of those things definitely help for sure. Practicing so that you're just more confident, and then accepting that some people just won't like me. Like that's okay.
And it's not personal. Like maybe you got them on a bad day. Maybe they're grandma just died. Maybe they don't like skinny dudes. Maybe they're into fat dudes. And this is a thing. Maybe they don't like skinny chicks. And I've hit on blokes who are only into curvy chicks.
Yeah.
and been turned down specifically because I was too skinny. So you can't, you never, and you might never know the reason, right? And
Yeah.
it can go two ways. You can be like, oh, I wonder what's wrong with me, and you can stew of that, or you can just go, okay, well, I don't know the reason, and it was probably nothing to do with me. And since you're never really going to know the reason, you may as well choose the latter because it's going to help you feel a lot better about yourself.
Yeah.
But
I've
I
seen
find
guys
that
like,
the people,
you go.
that the people who get angry about getting rejected, or the people who take it badly, are usually the ones who tend to assume that rejection means there's something wrong with them, and rejection doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It could be any reason, and it probably has nothing to do with you. The person wasn't right for you, but because there's a bit of insecurity there, they immediately assume that it's something about them.
Yeah, I used to take rejection really bad, like really
Me
bad.
too.
Like
I
I would
fucking
literally
hate it.
just,
I still hate it.
yeah, yeah. I don't. I've said this before too. I did an article about like something like rejection. It was in an article called "Insecurity Never Goes Away. You Just Stop Caring," and I talked about rejection in that. And I said, rejection never stops hurting, but at some point you're just like, whatever. I've been rejected 1,000 more times. Great. Guess I'm gonna feel sad for 15 minutes, and then I'll feel better. Like you're just used to the process of like waiting for it to pass. And that's all you ever really need to do. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Grief never stops hurting.
Moving through it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I get really pissed off when people tell guys that they should just, if a woman rejects you, you should just harden the fuck up, mate, and just like suck it up. Like I agree, like if someone rejects you, you need to respect it, but you don't you don't need to harden up. It's not about not feeling your feelings. It's not about trying to repress that shit, because that ain't great. That's going to come up some other way. You really got to go, like I'm hurting right now, and that's okay because rejection hurts. And as you said, now I'm just going to let that emotional process happen. I'm going to move through it, and I'm going to realize it's not personal. Yeah. If they're like, and they try and just suck it up and like do the stiff upper lip thing, all you're doing is taking all that negative shit and pushing it down, and then at some point it'll blow up probably on someone while you're on a
I was
date,
going to say on the next girl that you talk to, or like in 10 more girls' time you talk to her, and then she's like, I'm sorry, I have a boyfriend. You're like, you have a boyfriend, you fucking bitch? Like, how dare you not be single, you whore? And like, you just yell. Yeah. And she's like, what? I'm sorry. Like, why? I didn't do anything. And
oh my God. Or all those profiles you see on dating apps where the guy's like, does anyone even want to talk on this? Or I'm only going to match with you if you're actually going to meet me in person. And they're super angry. And I
have you seen the female versions of those? Like maybe
no. How does it go?
So it's the same stuff. It's exactly the same. Like it's the same stuff, and it's like you've obviously just been rejected a lot of times, or you didn't get what you wanted.
And they're taking it personally, and it's coming out as negativity that will fucking kill. I mean, no one's going to swipe right on that shit.
I don't think they want anyone to. I think by that point they're too angry, and they're almost kind of just wanting more and more rejection. And so then they can just quit the app and say like, this doesn't work. Dating is stupid. Nobody likes to date. Everyone's a bitch, or everyone's a whore, or everyone's an asshole. Like guys just want pussy. They don't actually want to love me. Goodbye. And it's like,
unfortunately, hating yourself is a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah,
if you think that if you take everything personally, you'll start to become the kind of person that no one wants to be around. And then it's like, oh, well, I was right. See, no one likes me. I can't even get laid. It's this nasty, vicious circle.
Yeah, for sure. Speaking of getting laid, have you always been, here's the $1 million question. Have you always been this comfortable with sex? Because I'll tell you my answer after you give your answer. Have you always been this comfortable with like your body, with sex, with like talking about it?
No, well, a little bit. Like I'm a bit of a don't give a shit kind of person. So I've always been like that way. But yeah, definitely I was a bit more shy around sex when I came out of high school and stuff. And then I had the good fortune to run into this bloke that I dated for 3 years, who was just like super alternative and super kinky. And he basically did probably what you do now with your partners, and sat me down. We had a couple of cocktails. He's like, so what are you into? What have you always wanted to try? Like that you haven't tried yet. Let's make this stuff happen. And I was like, oh my God. And then we tried all the things and it was great. And then it turned out I was kinkier than him. So he was unimpressed about that. But then I was off, And at that point I was in the Sydney kink scene, and I got to see a lot of things that I think people don't get to see. I got to end up at, at middle-aged people's houses on weekend nights watching a whole lot of swingers going for it. I got to see some really full-on kink stuff going down. And after I'd been through that, I'm like, you know what? Sex is sex. People do weird shit on the weekends. Don't care. Even if it's not my kink. I'm just like, we all get up to things. And it's hard to be embarrassed after you've seen like some of the things. that I've
Yeah.
seen.
Yeah. I can
What
imagine.
about you? What's
I
your
was
story?
okay. I was exactly the same. I was like so puritanical. I just like I wouldn't even like have affection with people in public. I didn't want to hold hands.
Oh
I felt
no, the
weird
no
even about
homo
auntie,
thing.
even with women. But yeah, no, in that same sort of feeling, it's coming from that same place of like I got to be a strong man. I can't be holding a girl's hand because that's like that's woman stuff. Like men just fish and punch
Showing
each other and like
affection to a woman is so gay. So gay.
that. No,
But
you joke, but that's literally what I would
I
have
know.
said. Like it's so
I
gay
know it's a
kissing a
thing.
woman. Kissing a woman
It's
is
it's
gay. And
it's
it's
a
like,
thing.
come on. Yeah, no,
Feelings,
it is.
feelings are female things that we don't do. This is why dudes. Oh God, can I say something kind of full on?
Say
Like, do we
whatever
need
you
to
want.
put
I
a
don't care. I'll just
trigger
chop out
warning
the
on
whole.
this
I'll
shit?
delete the whole podcast if it's bad. I don't care. Say whatever you
So
want.
this is why suicide rates for guys are massive, because we tell
Yeah.
blokes they're not allowed to have feelings, they're not
Yep.
allowed to have friends, they're not allowed to tell their friends about their feelings, and then
Yep.
they just off themselves at 20 or 30 because they can't hack life, because you need to be able to talk about your feelings.
Yep. Yeah, I can't tell
Otherwise
you
you're
how
just
many.
kind of fucked.
I can't tell you how many coaching clients I've had, and they come to me and like they say like, "Oh, I want to get laid, or I want to do this, or I want to do that," and I say like, "Bro, like, sorry, but the first thing we got to do right this second, like literally when you get off this phone call right now, you need to go and make some friends. You have no friends right now. You can't come to me and say I'm, 28, I'm 30, whatever age, I have no friends. Can you teach me how to get laid?" It's like you can't be talking to women. You need to make friends first. Have some people that you rely on. What are you going to do when you go outside and talk to 10 women and they all reject you? Who are you going to
You're
talk
going to
to?
need support.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. What are you going to do when you're depressed, when you're lonely, when you jerk off to porn too much and you hate yourself, when you get too drunk and you think, "Oh, I'm unproductive, I'm wasting my time, what's wrong with me?" What are you going to do when your boss yells at you at work? Like you need people to talk to. And I think like you said, guys get wrapped up in this notion. And I was like, this was me too, of like, I have to be like an alpha male and I have to just be perfect and I can't ever show
Lone
my
wolf.
feelings. I wanted to be the lone wolf for so long. And then I
You
realized
can't,
like, I'll get more done if I'm not. And that's probably the best
right?
answer. Yeah. If you want to get things done and you want to be productive and build this awesome life and all these things you're working towards, you're stupid if you try and do it by yourself. That's arrogance speaking. You'll get a quarter as much done, if not 1/20th as much done. Just decide what's more important. What is more of a priority? That you hit your goals and have an awesome life, or that you be a lone wolf. And I think most
This
people, if
goes
they're
for
honest
getting
with
laid
themselves,
too.
yeah,
I
yeah,
totally cut you off just then. Sorry.
that's fine. I finished,
This,
whatever. It's not like it's my podcast.
ah,
How
this
dare
goes
you
for
on my
getting laid as
podcast?
well. Like the stuff we tell men they need to do to get laid and the stuff that actually get them laid, the Venn diagram is like that.
It's like a little bit of a touch over, yeah, crossover.
Like
Yeah.
a little bit. There's a little bit, but a lot of the shit that'll actually get you laid has nothing to do with being a manly man or an alpha male, God forbid, or any of that shit. Like it's like, hey, do you know how to talk to women? And they're like,
Yeah.
That sort of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
We really
for
need
sure.
to do a podcast episode on how you survive the whole red pill business. I just would love to get that entire story
I mean,
out
you
of the
can
course of an hour.
wait on. You want me to come on your podcast and talk about
Oh
that?
yes. So
Yeah,
much.
I'll do that. I'm down for that. I mean,
So good.
for anyone listening, I'm going on your podcast in a couple of days with Imogen, my girlfriend. We're going to talk about
Super
threesomes
excited.
and stuff like that. Yeah, hell yeah, I'll come on and talk about that stuff. I've covered it a little bit, but let's just say it was like going through the mud, but you don't know that the mud is mud. You think that the mud is like a paradise. And like, I don't hate the red pill or anything, but like, I definitely needed it to be a stepping stone. I couldn't stay there forever. And I don't think most people can, for sure.
I think, like you said, it's a phase some people go through
Yeah.
around those attitudes and shit. And I think it's just really good to understand what that process looks like, so that hopefully we can help people get out of it.
Yeah. It's basically like you figure out that a lot of what society has told you, like in movies and Disney and all that kind of stuff, is just like goofy as hell, stupid as hell.
It's bullshit.
Like women are not like up here. They're not gods. They're not like 80 times better than you or anything like that. And so you go like too far off in the other direction to where you start thinking
Suddenly
like,
you're
okay,
a
so
flat earther.
yeah, basically. So if women aren't goddesses, that must mean they're the devil. Like they're just horrible bitches. They're all trying to use you, evil sluts. Like you just use all these kind of words, right? And you're just like, they're horrible. They have a concept of like all women are like that, as in like every single woman will cheat on you. That's one of the concepts that they have. And if you point out any women that haven't or wouldn't cheat, they'd say like, no, just wait for the opportunity. She's waiting for
It'll
and it's like,
happen,
come
mate.
on. It's like, you can't just like, that's like the biggest fallacy ever, where if I present evidence to you to the contrary, you just say like, no, that doesn't count. And it's like, why doesn't it count? Because I said so. It's like, well, then
Right.
we're not having a conversation now.
Confirmation fucking bias.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Right. Yeah.
But I am,
like,
I was just going to quickly say, I am grateful to the red pill. They definitely got me through. So I want to make that clear. And I try and make that clear every time I bring them up. Like, I wouldn't have gone to the gym. I wouldn't have stopped thinking that women were perfect angels. I think it was a stepping stone for me that I needed to get through. And I think I spent about a year, maybe a year and a half there. And I think I quickly identified this is making me very angry and upset. Like, I don't enjoy reading articles about, like, this woman killed her babies in the bathtub. This woman cheated on her husband. This woman, like, did this. It's like it felt like every article was like, let's pick every bad thing that any woman has ever done and then just say, that's women. See, we all know that women are bad. Look, this woman killed her kids. And it's like, come on, if we're going to do that to men. Like, why does this have
Well,
to be a battle?
the opposite happens in sex work circles where we get
Does
together
it?
and then so we're getting together having a drink, a group of escorts or whatever, and then one of them's like, oh, you won't believe what Fred did on the weekend, and then other person's like, oh, I had this client that was just so gross, and then another person's like, oh, I had this client that did this crazy fucking thing, and then everyone's like, why are men? But you know what, or most of our clients are men.
Mhm.
Whereas if you talk to male escorts that see women, and I know a couple, yeah, some crazy shit goes down. And if you talk to gay escorts, guys that see guys, yep, some shit goes down. I don't think being an asshole is exclusive to any gender. I think you
I
do
agree.
get a bias. So if you're mostly dating women, then yeah, you might think they're the ones that treat you badly. If
Yeah.
I've seen some pretty freaky shit that guys have done, but again, it just depends who you're hanging out with, because the certain percentage of everyone is an asshole, right?
Yeah, you see this on Tinder as well. Like I said to you before, like, hey, have you seen the female versions of like the bitter? And you say like, no, not really. And it's like that's all I see. And then if I want to see the
Right.
male ones, it's only if I talk to a woman and say, hey, do you want to talk about Tinder? Which I've done a lot because I find that stuff interesting. And then they'll show me their Tinder and like sometimes they'll
You
even
go,
literally show me the
what?
messages and I'll be like, why are these guys doing this? Why are you getting so many dick pics? What the hell? I didn't know that was a thing. Like you see that side of things. And so I'm fully on board with this idea that, men aren't bad, women aren't bad, but if you're exposed to enough bad people, and I will then say, and if you choose to keep focusing on those negatives, then yeah, you are going to start having
Sticks there.
yeah,
It's the
you see
Sun
this
Herald
in
effect.
retail. Yes. You see this in retail as well, where people are like, man, retail customers are assholes. And it's like, are they, or are you just only dealing with them? And I'm someone that worked in retail for like 10, something like 10 years, maybe slightly less than that, as a manager
Yep.
as well. So I had to deal with the negative customers. And I can tell you, most customers were lovely. Like 99% of customers were lovely because I chose to forget about the bad ones and focus on the good ones. So it's all about like where you
Mm.
focus.
Our brains are wired to remember the bad stuff. And having said that, there's a reason, right? This is a survival thing. And this
Yeah.
this applies for safety when dating. There's a reason that the bad incidents is really sticking our head, because we have to continuously being on the lookout, right? For people
Yeah.
that might assault or otherwise hurt us.
Hmm.
But yeah, this applies to everything. We always remember the standout bad examples. We don't remember all the other people that have been nice to us. So it's super easy to get negative.
Yeah. It's funny that you bring up the survival thing because I've had this conversation before where guys will have like baggage from past relationships and they'll be very down on themselves and they'll be like, why can't I just trust women? What's wrong with me? And I kind of have to have that conversation and say, like, I don't want you to beat yourself up, mate. Like, you're having this defensive behavior or you've built up this shell as a protective mechanism. It served you
Yes.
well, it's helped you.
Yes.
Stop beating yourself up for this. Now, it is time to ask yourself the question, do I want to keep doing this? Is this still serving me or is it now getting in the way of intimacy? So, have that conversation. We'll have it right now, but don't beat yourself up. This protection mechanism has helped you.
There really is no such thing as a negative emotion. Anger is protective. So if you're angry,
Yes.
there's something you need to protect yourself from. Sadness shows you what you care about. If you get
Hmm.
dumped and you're super sad, it shows you that that mattered to you, and that's an important thing to
And that you want
acknowledge.
that again. Yeah. And that you want
And
to
that
go
you
and
want
find that
that
again.
again.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So by paying attention to all this stuff, rather than going, oh, I'm having a negative emotion, I'm a terrible person, going, hey, why do I feel so angry about this? Like, there'll be a
Hmm.
reason, and I'm protecting myself somehow. There's some sort of hurt or some sort of vulnerability or danger.
Yeah.
Fear also, like, I feel like when we're afraid, and particularly when we're afraid when it comes to dating, that's our bodies telling us that we're not safe enough yet. And I know a lot of dudes that feel like they're not allowed to be nervous, or if they're going to try
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
that's a bit out there, they're not allowed to be scared. They just have to
Yeah.
Rambo on in and nail it, or her, as the case may be. But it's like, nah, man, you being scared is your body going, wait, you're not quite safe enough. Maybe you need to have
Yeah.
more of a chat with them. Maybe
Yep.
this kink isn't for you.
Yep.
You know,
Do I want to plan it out a little more? Do I want to think through
take
what
some
I'm going to do,
time.
what we're going to do? Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah.
maybe it's not the right person. Maybe you don't fully trust them.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
so you
for
can't
sure.
relax, right?
Yeah.
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 So negative
And then
emotions.
sometimes it's even just nerves. And in those cases, I say this all the time. I say, like, just frickin' tell her. Just frickin' say I'm nervous. And then 99% of the time she'll say, like, oh, okay, me too. And then you'll be like, cool, let's be nervous together. Let's
It's
figure this
great.
out. Like, that solves the problem 99% of the time. I'm nervous. And she's like, oh, great, me too. Cool.
I had
So
a really
is
good
this
podcast guest who called Alison Moon, who was on my podcast a couple of months ago, and she made a distinction between the fear that comes from being in an unsafe situation and the fear that comes from that nervous anxiety and anticipation and you know, being vulnerable. And if you can kind of tell the difference, that's useful, because that fear of being vulnerable and opening up to someone and getting naked with someone is totally natural, and we need to sort of lean into it as much as we can. But then if it's a fear of being in an unsafe situation, then you need to know when to bail.
Don't just say I'm going to tough it out. I'm going to walk down this alleyway at 3 a.m. because I'm
It's not
just being a
smart.
little pussy. It's like, there is some fear that you need to listen to, for sure. I say this all the time. I have a podcast or an idea called, like, Run Towards Fear. And I think I make it very clear in that. I'm like, this doesn't count if we're talking about jumping off a cliff without a parachute and stuff like that. Like, there are some fears. I don't want to get rid of every fear I have. Most of the fears, sure, but not all of them. So
you can push into it too. You can kind of, you can feel your way. We call this like edge play, you know, so you can feel your way towards your edge in a way that's safe, knowing that you can step back if you need to. But I feel like most blokes are told they just have to charge on in and show no fear at all, which means they're not even tuned into how afraid they are. So they're kind of like taking all their primitive instincts and throwing them out the fucking window before they do anything dangerous, which is not smart.
So guys listening right now, the reason that you are talking so much about, like, guys, and, you know, you guys might be listening and thinking, like, how does she know so much about, like, guys being nervous and stuff? Like, we didn't actually say this at the start of the podcast, but I'll do an intro. Like, you're an escort, amongst other things. You work as an escort. And so does this come up very much? Like, a guy is, like, terrified, or maybe he has erectile dysfunction. Like, and how do you work through it? And I already know the answer to this because you did a podcast on this, but for the audience.
Yes. And this was a surprise to me, because when I started doing sex work, I thought that, you know, the stereotype, like that I'd be in a room with this guy and he'd be like, I paid you.
And he's like rock hard and he's like, let's go.
Right. And that's not it. What happens is you walk in the room and this poor bastard is shitting himself. Right. And then you have to somehow talk him out of his clothes. So it's very much like a therapy in that way. Like you really need to work with someone's fear and help them get comfortable, and then say, hey, what are you into? Here's how we're going to do that, and walk them through it and make it safe for them. So I've had a lot of practice at making things safe for people. It's a really good skill.
It's almost like you're the female version of, I said this to you last time, you're like the female version of me, but you're like the female version of me in terms of, like, when I mentor girls, because Imogen and I have to do the same stuff, especially a girl who hasn't tried anything and she's really nervous. You have to, like, literally show them, like, this is okay, let's go really slow, let's try this. Yeah, the millisecond you're not comfortable, just say it, because we want you to have fun. Tell us if it hurts, tell us if it's uncomfortable. This is supposed to feel good. Like, you have to have those conversations. And one guy on my forums, a guy called Brother Tucker, he asked the question about, like, the erectile dysfunction. He said, like, how often does it happen? And, like, what tips and tricks do you have? Because I'm assuming that he, and there's a few guys on my forums, me, myself as well, who've had erectile dysfunction sometime. I think pretty much every guy in his life has had it at least once or twice. Yeah, it's a very normal thing. So how do you, like, deal with it? Do you just, like, say, like, hey, we'll try other stuff? Like, what do you do?
I think it's almost like par for the course. Like, you know how they say your first swingers party, you're not going to get a hard on. Like, for your first sex worker or your first escort, you're probably going to be too nervous to get it up. But sex isn't just about sticking a dick in things. Sex is about a whole load of stuff. So I'll be like, hey, you know what? You don't need an erection for us to have fun. Like, let's make out. Do you want me to go down on you? Because going down on someone when they're not hard is still really nice. It has this different feeling to it.
It still feels good. It's like really... So from a guy's point of view, I'll tell you what it feels like. It feels like it's the same level of pleasure, but in a, I'm going to butcher this, but, like, in a very, like, soft way. It feels more gentle because I guess you are really soft. Nice. Yeah.
You can kind of, like, I hope this isn't too much detail, but you kind of, like, roll around your mouth a little bit. As opposed to it just, like, jamming into your tonsils. So I actually really like going down on guys when they're not hard.
Okay,
the other thing I discovered recently, again from another person on my podcast, God bless her, you actually can't hit someone's, there's some bits inside some people's junk that you can't hit when you've got a full erection. It sort of goes right past. And if you want to get like around the G-spot region, if you've got a semi, it actually works better.
I know exactly what you're talking about because I've felt this like so many times with Imogen, where it's like you're not quite 100% hard and you do kind of, it's almost like you can feel like you're bumping against something. Yeah.
So I think she called it the A spot. There's a few spots in there. My anatomy ain't great. But she's like, unless you like a hard dick won't get that spot generally because it goes right past. So it's kind of like getting an erection isn't the one thing you need for good sex. Maybe you want to try the other stuff. Maybe you want to get a semi and try and hit that A spot. Maybe you want to not do POV and do other things. And there's so many other things that you can do. So I give someone this talk, and usually it's kind of startling because most guys have sort of been trained to think that sex is POV or nothing. Whereas that's just not my definition. Like, sex is so broad. So then we get up to stuff like, what do we get up to? I don't know, like full on, like we'll do a bit of a massage, and then I might like, again, let me know if this is too much detail for your listeners.
Go crazy. Kay, you're talking to me like the king of crass who just says the most inappropriate things all the time.
My mother listens to my podcast, so
don't let her listen to mine.
I'll blurt something out, and they'll be like, "Oh God, Mum, I'm sorry, I mentioned the gangbangs." And so I might like teach him how to touch me, how I like to be touched, for example. Or we might do like nipple experiments, like my nipples are sensitive. Are your nipples sensitive? Let's try this spot. Let's try that spot. And it's really fun. And then usually by the time they sort of stop concentrating on their dick, they end up getting an erection anyway because they've stopped worrying about it. And then, if we start having sex and it goes again, which happens, particularly because I practice really, really solid, safer sex, which means that as soon as the dick's hard, the condom goes on. And then, of course, as soon as you're concentrating on putting the condom on, often they'll be like, oh, shit, and then they'll lose it again. So we go through this process. It'll go up, it'll go down. I don't give a shit. And then, either we end up having regular PIV or they'll just be like, hey, this, we got up to some awesome stuff.
Yeah, so and I'd assume a lot of them are hitting you up for intimacy as much as like just sex. I would guess you tell me, is this like 95% of people are coming to you for like intimacy as well as sex, but like that's the main draw?
I do more what's generally termed GFE, girlfriend experience. So it's very much about hanging out and chatting and hugs and, whatever. And then some people do like the PSC, more of porn star experience stuff, which probably is a bit more like full on in terms of positions and in terms of that sort of thing. But again, most of us are kind of in between. So it's not like there's just these two ways of doing escorting. I'm sure I've had some pretty full on porny sex if I meet the right person. Just depends.
Do you kind of like vibe off them?
Yeah. And you all have a different connection with everyone, right? So, you might meet a customer and then you're both like, oh my God, let's fuck like nasty pigs, to quote Orgasmo. If you haven't seen that, you definitely should. Or, I might meet someone where I'm like, hey, I really want to spend an hour talking to you about life while we're making out. That would be amazing. And everything, it just depends on the person,
Because I think there's this notion with like escorts and sex workers that like, you just have a routine and you're just like a robot going through the motions. And I'm sure there are some people like that. Like in every industry, there's people who are like, let's put a value judgment on it. Yeah. I was going to phrase it less nicely than that. I was just going to say people who are like bad at their job or incompetent. Like they're just hitting the status quo.
Zoning out.
You know what I'm trying to say.
And sure, you might meet sex workers who are just doing their job in a really rote fashion. Everyone's different in how they approach the job, but I feel that for me it's about finding that little thing about the person I'm hanging out with that I really like, so that we can vibe over that. Sometimes it's just their sense of humor, or that they have an interesting job or an interesting story to tell. It's not about how they look, it's not about how big their dick is, none of that stuff. And then once you're vibing a bit, you sort of you work out where that vibe's going to go. And it's a really great skill. It's a great skill for dates too, meeting someone and sort of being curious, like, how are we going to vibe? Are we going to fuck like nasty pigs vibe? Are we going to deep and meaningful vibe? Like, I can't wait to find out. And then sorting that process out as you talk and as you get more intimate. It's really cool.
Yeah, I did a podcast with, I think Imogen came on it. That's hilarious that I can't remember. But at this point in time, I've done so many podcasts, I can't remember which one.
I can imagine.
But this one was about like different dynamics. And how you'll vibe differently with different people. Like maybe you meet
Mhm.
someone who's super shy, so you're just kind of like, okay, I'll take on the like the parenting kind of role. Maybe you meet someone who's just energetic and boisterous. One of the girls that we're seeing right now is just like so loud. She doesn't have an inside voice. She just yells all the time. She's hilarious. And so like from her, I'm going to be more energetic. I'll make jokes. I'll tease her a little bit. She'll tease me back. You have that kind of vibe. So you do kind of
Mm.
vibe off the people that you're with. And I say this to guys all the time. Try and be a little more open-minded with the people that you date. And if you can find like a couple of things that you love about them, as long as there's like some mutual attraction there to begin with, sure. But a lot of guys will say like, oh, I never date girls who are like, I don't know, nerdy into books and stuff. And I'll say like, well, have you ever actually tried? Like, why don't you try? Why don't you try having a conversation? Ask her about, what books you're interested in. Like sometimes when you get people to open up, you start going like, oh, I really respect this person. I kind of like this person. A lot of the time, just
Mm.
over the course of like a 1 hour date or something, you get to feel this like lust isn't the right word, but like chemistry, like attraction,
Chemistry.
intimacy. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we can't really, like, you don't want to shoehorn people into boxes either. You don't want to go, I don't date nerdy girls, because that hot chick you picked up at the beach, she might be a fucking physics professor. You just don't know.
Yeah.
You really need to
Yeah.
kind of like be open to whatever's going to come and go, I'm curious about you. What kind of person are you, or who are you as a person? Not what kind of box can I dump you in, like,
Yeah.
hot chick, nerdy chick, but like who are you going to reveal yourself to be to me? And it might be a bit from column A, a bit from column B, and it's interesting. Yeah, but when you look at someone and you're like, oh, not my type, you're probably missing like 90% of the person, right?
Mm. Mm. Speaking of like vibing and stuff, another question. I hope it's okay that I ask you just like a bunch of questions, because like I told you
Totally.
last time, my guys were so interested in like
I want to
you
know
and
what the
like
questions are. Like, pass some of the
okay.
questions from your guys on. I'd love to answer. This is my shit, man.
Well, I'll go through them now if you want me to. I'll just
Yeah,
like
do it.
spam you.
I
Okay.
love this stuff. Mm-hmm.
So another guy, Joe, I love Joe. Shout outs to Joe, good guy. And he basically said, what happens if you're like super turned off by a guy? Like maybe you're not feeling the chemistry, you're not vibing. Like, would you just take the job anyway and like find a way, like you said before, can I connect with this person? Can I click? Can we have a good time? Or are there any where you just say like, I don't think I can take your money, or I'd rather we just don't go forward. Like, I don't think I
It's
could
really
do a good
tricky
job for you.
because I talk to people on the phone and via email before I meet them, but that doesn't give you a good idea of the actual connection. And the
I can
first time I
imagine,
meet
yeah.
them is when I show up for the booking, and maybe they booked a hotel room and it's a lot of money, it's a big investment, they may have paid a deposit. So look, this is about finding something that I like about the person, and yeah, it usually is like a sense of humor, or just that they're a kind person. I really have a problem with assholes. So the only time I would ever find someone attractive, it wouldn't have anything to do with their physical appearance. I've been with guys that were like really old, or had one dude had full body eczema, the poor bastard. I've been with guys, people with a disability that might be missing limbs and stuff like that. I don't give a shit. It's all about who the person is. And if the person is not a great person, like if they're a really nasty, awful person, and I couldn't, then I might have to walk. And if I walked, I would have to obviously give them their deposit back. It would be pretty bad. I've never had to walk, but I would if I met someone where I'm like, I cannot find anything about you that I can vibe off. But I've always managed to find something.
I'd say that makes you a pretty open-minded person then.
You do need to be, yeah. And it's not about physical appearance at all, because people that are not conventionally attractive can be really good in bed. And I've discovered this from my work. Like you meet some elderly bloke that's probably shagged like 50 escorts, and you're like, oh my God, this happened to me. I love this man. He's a professor. And we went out on a dinner date, and he's about like 85 or something. I'm thinking, this is going to be an easy night. We got back to the hotel room, and he just fucked me for 2 hours without stopping. And I went,
what did he like take like 10 Viagra? What the hell?
Yeah, so I went home and I called my friend, and I'm like, you won't believe what just happened. I thought I was going to have a nice relaxing night, and I got the shit fucked out of me. And she goes, dude, Viagra. Like, clearly.
But even Viagra at 80 something years old, that's okay. You've just reassured me.
He was very well
I
endowed as well. So it was actually quite nice.
When I'm 80, that's going to be my story. Okay. Like that's
right. Do it, man. But it had nothing to do with his appearance.
I was going to ask you what's the craziest story, but I'm assuming that's.
No, that's not the craziest story.
I feel so vanilla when I talk to you.
Sex work is great because you just get to see this full breadth of human sexuality. And yeah, you do see some bad behavior, but not because sex work is bad or it attracts bad people, but just because everyone tends to be, everyone in the world has pretty bad communication, and there are some real Fruit Loops out there. And as a sex worker, like being in retail, you're going to meet people that you wouldn't have otherwise. So you will come across these people. So yeah, I've come across some real nut bars. Yes. But you kind of, it's really cool getting to see what people are like and getting to meet all these people you would never have normally, particularly.
Is this a good analogy? Like, it's like, because there is this notion, I don't think any of my guys think this, but like, okay, maybe everybody does to some extent. I probably did too, like years ago, where you think like, as a sex worker, you're probably just seeing like way worse people. Like you think like, oh, the people that would go to a sex worker are probably desperate or something
Terrible
like that.
people.
And I've made this point so many times. It's like, dude, it's like guys who've just like focused on their career at the expense of dating. And so now they just like, they're normal dudes. They just haven't focused on dating. And then they say, oh, I can just like pay some money, spend some time with a woman. She'll be nice to me. We'll have a good time. Yeah. I've had this conversation.
It's literally everyone. Like I was sitting in a pub once and one of my uni mates was like, oh, so what sort of guys see sex workers? And I went, look around you. Like everyone in this
for
pub,
sure.
Basically.
I've seen a sex worker. I've seen a sex worker like I think like 6 times when I was younger. When I was like 23. Yeah, and I remember there was one of them in particular. She was really nice to me. It was when I was really shy and like unsure of myself and all that. She was really nice, and she's all like, she was like this Asian woman, and she's all like, "You find nice girlfriend. You so sweet. You sweet boy." And I was like, "Oh, why are you being so nice to me?" And she's like, "You're very good in bed. You're very good." And I was like, that actually made me feel really nice, like because I thought I was just like done for. No women would like me. I was like 23 or something. I just started fixing my depression. Yeah,
that's so nice. And the thing is, we don't have to pay clients compliments. And if you if you're saying, a lot of guys are kind of like, oh, you must always be lying to guys and like kissing their asses and stuff. Or if I pay a compliment to a client, they're like, oh, you're just saying that. But no, I don't have to pay anyone a compliment. I can turn up, do my job, smile nicely, go home. If I'm not going to tell you I think you're great unless I actually think you are. And this might be different for different people. But yeah, like totally. If someone's good in bed, if someone's like, if we have a really good vibe, it does actually make me really happy, because who wouldn't want to have fun at work,
Yeah, for sure. What is, another question from a guy on my forum is radical. What is dating like for you in this line of work? Does this line, I guess the other question that he didn't ask, but I guess is tied in there, is like, does this affect your dating life? Are there some guys that are just like, nah, deal breaker for me?
Yeah, and this is the same as, because I'm polyamorous as well.
Yeah, that's a deal breaker for a lot of people, as I've found too.
Yeah, it's not the same thing. So sex work it's work. So, but a lot of people have trouble sort of understanding that. So if you say to a bloke, oh, yeah, I do have sex with other people, but it's sex work. And they're like, I don't understand. You're telling me you fuck other people. I'm like, no. It's work. And the only thing that really works for me, I had an ex who was like, it's not fair that you get to go to work and fuck all these guys. And I'm like, why don't you go fuck some guys for money? Then you'd understand what sex work was like. And he goes, oh, I could never do that. And I said, why? Because I'm not into dudes. And I'm like, yeah. And I wouldn't be fucking my clients if they weren't paying me. So same shit, man. Like, it's work. And it's fun and I enjoy it. But I don't enjoy it. Okay. A lot of guys enjoy it. I enjoy it. Doing a good job, enjoy it.
I'm gonna give you an analogy for like very similar to that, because it's one I can relate to. So it would be, God, any one of my clients who's listening right now, just know I love you all very much. That's the first thing I'm gonna say. I need to think of a nice way to say this, because there are some people that are gonna hear this and be like, what the hell are you saying? So there are certain exceptions to what I'm gonna say, and if you think you might be an exception, you probably are the exception to what I'm gonna say. Okay, so certain people, you know that you're the exception to what I'm going to say. But it would be like me saying, would I hang out with and grab a beer and talk to my coaching clients if they weren't paying me? And yes, there will be some exceptions that I would, and you guys probably know who you are because I love you guys. But for the vast majority, fuck no. Nothing against them as people.
Boundaries, man.
Yes, I hang out with them. I give them my time because they're helping me pay my bills. That's like a fair exchange. And same as
you're performing a service.
Yes.
And it's a good service.
Yeah. And so is yours. And that's kind of the point that you're getting to here. It's like, it's not, because people have this idea of like, oh, but you're cheating on me, or, you're caring about the other people, or how come you're having sex? And it's the same. That's like, if my friends or Imogen or someone was like, why are you spending all these time with other people? And it's like, because they're helping me pay the bills. Like,
and I do care about them, but I care about them the way you care about the people you work with. I care
Yes.
about them as the same way you
Boundaries.
care about
Like you
your
said,
coaching
boundaries.
clients. Yeah.
Boundaries.
Yeah.
And that's something I had to learn like over time. It probably learned it like maybe 2 years ago, like to have boundaries. Because I used to, okay, sometimes I still make this mistake where, I let my clients message me too much on like my personal social media. And I have to cut that off sometimes and say, like, I'm sorry, man, I can't answer you multiple times a week when I have like, 20 other clients right now. Like, because that would just blow my inbox up. I need to have a life myself. Is that something you've ever run into? Like,
Oh,
or
you
did
have
you
to be
have boundaries
so
from the
clear.
start?
You got to be
Okay.
so clear, and you find out straight away if your boundaries aren't good, because a lot of the people that we see, they don't understand that it's work sex either. Why should they? They don't do
Yeah.
sex work. So it's really easy for them to be like, oh, we're best buddies now. I'm going to
Yeah. Yeah.
message
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
and can we hang out for coffee? And have to go, dude, no, I'm your professional. You need to treat me like a professional. And that means when we're in the room together, you can have the feelings and all the stuff. And when we're out of the room, I go back to being a professional, which means we don't chit chat. And if you don't enforce that boundary, you end up with grade A clingers that send you messages every day until you absolutely go insane.
Yes.
I'd have to dump them. So I
Yeah.
actually coach escort clients, which is
Okay,
great
that's
fun.
cool. You didn't tell. I didn't know that.
I
That's
do,
cool as
not very
hell.
many, but a few. And a
Okay.
lot of it is emotional boundaries, because they're like, oh, I think
Yeah.
I've fallen for my escort. What do I do? And I say
Mm,
boundaries, because if you don't put those boundaries down, she's going to dump you, mate. Like, it's not sustainable for them if you're going to be hassling them or trying to date them or trying to message them all the time. You really need to cut that shit out, or they'll cut off contact with you. So
yeah.
yeah, we
Yeah.
get pretty good at that pretty fast. Otherwise, it would get super out of hand.
I had the
Yeah,
same
like
thing early
freaky.
on. Yeah. Yeah. I had to kind of establish some boundaries, and that was a process for me. It was a process for some of
Gotta
my
learn.
clients. Yeah. Yeah. And you make mistakes for sure. Like I made
Mm-hmm.
mistakes with one particular guy. He's probably listening right now. He knows exactly what I'm talking about. We're close now. Um, but yeah,
It's
it's
tricky
like,
stuff.
it is because you want to be that good person. You want to care about them. You want to say like, I'm here for you, especially me as like a counselor kind of thing, like a coach, like you want to be there for them, but you just can't, unfortunately. You don't
Can I
have the
reframe that
emotional
for you?
go.
If you're mentoring someone, sometimes the best thing you can do for them is set clear boundaries, because it helps
Yes.
them feel safe, and it also teaches them what they need to know, which is that they need to respect boundaries and they need to
Yep.
develop boundaries. So if
Yep.
you have a boundaryless encounter with someone, it's actually hurting them, because it's modeling really poor behavior. Whereas if you model good boundaries, they go, oh shit, this is how I need to be. And because
Mhm.
we're not good at this stuff, right? So sometimes it takes a mentor setting the boundaries for us to go, oh wow, now I know what's expected of me, and now I can do what you're doing, and I know how to do it because I've seen you do it. So you're kind of like caring for people,
It's almost like boundaries is one word, one way of phrasing it. I'd almost phrase it like expectations. You're telling them, here's
Yep.
what the expectations are.
Here's what I want from you.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And if you can match that, sweet. If you can't, like, we'll just have to go separate ways. Like, that's
But at
fine.
least then they know. So it's kind of like it's a bit like creating quite a lot of safety for them, rather than them just
Yeah,
flailing around and going, I don't know how to handle this coach sort of mentor relationship. You go, no, this is how it works, and this is what you'll get from me. Here's what to expect. Here's what's okay. Here's what's not okay. And then they can
yeah,
kind of relax.
yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. So, more questions. Do you see
Yes.
yourself staying in this line of work in the long run, or do you plan on moving to like podcasting, writing, like something else full time, or like a mix of both?
Yeah, cool. Oh, and just to finish off the last question too,
Go.
I will say that I'm dating someone magnificent now who does not give a shit about any of the other things I get up to.
That's probably
So
what you
yeah,
want, right? Like,
oh, so good. So
that's like
sex workers
mandatory.
do date, and they
Yeah.
do get married and have kids and all those things. It definitely happens. So happy ending. Just wanted to
Hmm.
tack that on there.
Is he a sex
Um,
worker, or does he do something else?
no, he works in property actually, super straight. Yep, just super cool, muso. Just doesn't
Nice.
give a shit about my sexual behavior. It's wonderful.
Cool.
Yeah, so good. Yeah, so okay. Forever. Look, I've been doing this for 10 years, on and off. I do a whole lot of other stuff as well. My problem isn't so much that sex work has an expiry date, because you can be a sex worker in your 80s. There's this awesome doco about these two sisters in Amsterdam that are like 85 and doing sex work, and it's just so heartwarming. It's lovely. It's more that I have a short attention span. So about every 4 years, I start a new job or a new project. I have like 5 or 6 different jobs on the go. That
You
sort
and
of
me
thing.
both. Yeah.
So right, I just get bored. I need to be doing new stuff all the time. So and then of course during the coronavirus pandemic, that shut sex work down. Sex work was outlawed in Melbourne for a year or more, I think.
Yeah, I know. That was like, it was freaking Imogen. We had that conversation literally when the lockdowns happened, and we were walking around and we were talking about like, oh, these businesses have closed. What about these? And no, it wasn't Imogen. It was Imogen and a friend of mine. And he said, do you know what's sad? Because he's single and he's someone who goes to escort sometimes. And he said,
Oh,
do you know what's
yeah.
fucking sad? No one gives a shit that I don't have a sex life. Like you
Yeah.
guys, and he wasn't bitter, but he's like, I love you guys, but like you guys have each other. And I was like, yeah, I know, man. I feel bad for you that like you have no one now. And you can't go outside and talk to women. You can't go to bars. You can't go on Tinder because that's illegal. And so like we then went on and we said like, wait, are the sex workers not allowed to do their job? And he went and Googled it and he's like, oh shit, yeah, they don't have work either. And I was like, what about the ones that have to pay the fucking bills? Like, what are they? And I know that a bunch of people lost their jobs and shit like that, but like,
real bad. Yeah.
that would have been, and that's the
not
time
even
you
just,
almost
like,
need it the most, like intimacy.
Yeah. But I was fine because I actually happened to just get another job right before it happened. But some
Okay.
people I know, yeah, were really in struggle town. And I also feel really sorry for the clients who couldn't get their needs met. And I just feel sorry for single people in general
Yeah,
during the
yeah,
pandemic and suddenly just not being able to go out and meet people and get laid and being isolated. And the
yeah.
other thing that happened was a small number of bad actors decided that since sex workers were out of business, they could, like, you know, try and like harass us to lower our rates or try and. So a few people
I
were like
wondered if
hassling
that would
people.
happen. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you know, maybe I'm blowing this out of proportion, but from my point of view, it looked like there were certain, it looked like the established sex workers versus, I think you know what I'm going to say here, girls just deciding I'm going to become an OnlyFans person. And I'm all for that. So like, I don't have a dog in the fight,
A
but
lot
like,
of that
I
lately.
found that
Yeah.
there was a lot,
Yeah.
like these people hated these people and these people hated these people because they were kind of competing for the same clients. You know what I mean?
Some people do. And some people get really weird about like people coming into the biz and being like, oh, these newbie sex workers, blah, blah. I reckon, I don't believe in gatekeeping. I reckon
Yeah.
if you want to do sex work, you should do sex work. And if you do sex work, you should be supported by the people that already do sex work. Like, can we just not.
Is it
shit on
welcoming? Is it
people?
like a
But yeah, there
welcoming?
was a bit of that.
Is it like a welcoming community?
Depends where you start.
Okay.
I started working in a brothel 10 years ago, and I
Yeah.
happened to start working one that was really nice. It was like female run. All the ladies were like a little family. And so they sort of
Okay.
taught me a whole lot of things. It was really nice. But there's other brothels you can work in where it's super competitive, and people are really catty and bitchy. And then in
Yeah.
private work, there's a really good network. So you make a lot of friends. I have a lot of friends in Melbourne, and we kind of talk and support each other. And yeah,
Okay.
that could be really nice.
Are there like forums for this stuff, or do you just kind of like exchange numbers, or?
Well, yeah, we kind of exchange numbers and we hang out. Like
Okay.
we hang out together, we
Okay.
go out, we, you know, text each other, all the things. Yeah, I know there are some forums on Reddit that I've seen, but I think they're open,
Yeah.
but their kind of quality tends to vary. But just basically catching up with people and getting, like, you know, if I hadn't called my mate after that booking, I would never have twigged that my 85-year-old client was on Viagra.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, come on. Okay, people listening are probably like, "What do you mean? How could you not tell?" Like,
I
sure.
was so naive. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
Couldn't believe
You're just
I'd
like, wow,
missed it.
he's a stud. I mean, okay, no, we don't have proof. Maybe he wasn't. Like, maybe he just is like maybe he's on testosterone and he's just like a horny old man.
Maybe he's on
Respect to him if he
testosterone.
is. Yeah.
Right? Respect to him either way, man. He was amazing.
I like this guy. Everyone listening is going to hear that story and be like, "Oh, I like this guy. That's me in like 40 years." Yeah.
It was so
We
lovely.
hope.
And such a
We
polite, quiet little man. And writing just a doctor, really tiny little man from the country, distinguished, and just a fucking sex machine.
How, on the note of like people getting into this stuff, another question that someone asked, playtime is over. He asked, like, how many girls do you think, like in general, think about becoming an escort? Do you think that's kind of a rare thing, or do you think that like a lot of girls entertain the idea, but they just don't due to embarrassment, social pressure, fear, like that sort of stuff? Like, what percentage? Make a percentage up.
Jeez, I don't know. And I can't, like, I don't think we can generalize around this stuff. I think some people are like, sex work is my calling, and they know from a young age. Some people give it a crack. Some people try it out because they have a credit card debt they need to pay off, and then they're like, oh, actually, this is great. Or some people try it and go, not for me. And it just depends. Like, I don't know if I could give you a percentage. I'd say that sex workers would be fairly small percentage of the general population, but I reckon that as sex work gets more and more accepted, like when we care less about people being escorts and stuff, more people will take it up as a profession, and that's cool. Like, if we can just get rid of some of the bullshit things people think about hookers, I'm allowed to say hooker because I'm a sex worker, then maybe more people will give it a go.
I'm allowed to say ginger for the same reason.
Are you a ginger?
I am, yeah, but you can't tell. How can you not? This is like
redhead.
Ginger. How can you not tell? Yeah, that's racist. Don't say that.
Too far away, man.
But do you feel, like, pulling it back on topic, do you feel like from your point of view, from the female point of view, obviously there's like, let's all agree there's like an insane stigma around like sex work and escorts. Let's just agree with that. There's also on the other side too. You reckon?
Oh yeah, and clients for sure, right?
Yeah. That's where I was going to go with that. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I can't agree.
Oh, you went to a prostitute? How dare you? And it's like, why do you care? I've had
you must be a total creep.
I want to have this conversation with you. You're the perfect person to have this conversation. There's been a few people who've come on either my forums or another forum that I used to be a part of, where I started my self-improvement and stuff, Good Looking Loser. And there's been a few people that come in and they say, like, I'm a virgin, I'm like 25, I have all these self-esteem issues with it. They look reasonably decent. Like, they're not ugly guys. They've worked on their appearance and stuff, but they can't get over that hump, because for them, it's this big deal of like, I'm a virgin. Like, what girl would sleep with me?
Right.
And to one guy in particular, I've said this to a few, but to one guy in particular, I kind of like pushed him. I said, like, look, dude, if you're comfortable with it, just stop complaining about this, because you've been unhappy for the last like 3 months and you've built this identity around like, I'm a virgin, I can't do it. Why don't you just go see an escort, and then you can get it over with, and then you can have a nice time with her, have fun. And like, he went away, and I said, don't post anything else until you say it, like, I'm the man who just got laid. And then like 4 days later, he comes back and he's like, I'm the man who just got laid. And I was like, yes.
So good.
Maybe you're going to be biased, but like, would you encourage that? I personally do. I'm like, if you're comfortable with that, just freaking do it, man. Like, don't have an ego around it. Why are you being weird? Yeah.
Like, why do we make virginity out to be such a big deal? And guys, or girls for that matter, that get to anyone that gets to 24 or 25 that hasn't got laid, there's this big shame, like it's something bad. It's like, no, man, you lose your virginity when the time's right. And if you want to wait for the right person, if you want to get married first, God forbid, do it. But if you want to see a sex worker and just sort it out, I've seen a number of virgins, and I tend to warn them. I go, hey, like, it's not going to be the same as with your first girlfriend and you're deeply in love, because that's a different vibe. But you'll get the experience, and I can talk them through a few things.
Oh, yeah, I can teach you. Yeah.
And I'll probably be a safer person than some rando person who might then be cruel to you or make fun of you. Or
I was going to say, one thing you're not going to do is judge them.
No, whereas that can happen in dating. So it can be quite nice to be with someone non-judgmental the first time. Yeah, like I wouldn't say everyone who's a virgin should go out and see a sex worker, but if it's something that's bothering you, it's a really easy way to take care of that problem. But for God's sake, tell them you're a virgin. Don't just show up and try to
wait.
Like,
have you had people that don't, and they obviously just trying to keep up that like masculine vibe of like, I know.
And then it comes out in conversation halfway through, and I'm like, I could have made this experience so much better for you if you just told me. Yeah.
But I get why they don't want to. Like, a lot of the guys that I talk to and guys I've coached and stuff like that, they do have a lot of like shame around being a virgin. It is like it's one of my challenges. I think I do a decent job of it, but like trying to drill into them. I even wrote an article called "Don't Compare Your Lay Count to Mine." Like, what does that fucking matter? But they do. Like, I get that people will come to my website, and maybe you have the same thing. They'll come to us and they'll go like, you guys are the sex experts. I'm not as good as you. And it's like, no, for fuck's sakes. We've just done something a little more than you. You're not better than me because you've eaten more ice cream than me. You know what I mean? You've ridden a bicycle more than me. You've driven a car more than me. Like, I don't even have a fucking car license. I don't drive. Like, that doesn't make people who drive a better person than me. They've just done something more than I've done it. And I think that's a hard concept for people to wrap their heads around, because they wrap so much self-esteem up in their sexuality, their sexual prowess, like all those kind of abilities. The
Some
numbers, like,
having they're having a lot of sex, but they're having a lot of shit sex, or they're having a lot of really repetitive sex that's really samey. I'd much rather be with someone that has less sex but has a kink that they're exploring, or has a bit of self-awareness. Like, quality, not quantity, is totally the thing.
Yeah, and this is like my biggest challenge, because I'm sure you've been to my website. I make a deal. I make it clear that like I've had sex with like roughly X number of women. And I've gone back and forwards on this so many times with Imogen, with other people, with some of my friends. Like, should I take that stuff down? Is that actually helpful? And eventually I've come to the idea of like, I think I need it there, because I think guys are obsessed with these numbers. And if I have that there, that's like, at least they will kind of listen to what I have to say.
Gets them through the door.
Yeah, but I
Mm.
like in that article I wrote about don't compare your lay count to mine. One of the points that I made was like the first probably 50, maybe even like 80 women that I slept with were not good. It was not good. It was like a lot of that was me cheating. My first two relationships, I cheated like hell. I've talked about that a lot. It was horrible. It made me, it cut me up inside. I felt like the most evil person ever. I'd swear that I wouldn't do it again, and then I'd just go off and do it. Please don't think that that's a glamorous lifestyle. Please don't just say like, oh, you had sex with 100 people. That means, it must be amazing. And it's like,
Because you
you
weren't
don't
having
know the full
fun.
context. Yeah.
Mm.
And if you have sex with 10, I have some clients who say like, I think I only want to have sex with 10 women. And as long as each one of them I really connect with and I really like, that's my mission. And I'm like, hell yeah, that's a good mission. Let's make that happen. Let's figure out ways that you can find people that you connect with rather than just like, I'm going to get my lay count up. I had this conversation with one of my friends recently. He won't mind me saying this, but he had this notion in his head that he had to get to 100 women. And then recently he said, I've been thinking maybe it shouldn't even be that. Maybe it should just be like half of that, or who knows? Maybe I should
Who
just focus on having
knows?
fun. Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, man, you don't know. Why 100? You don't
Just
get there and suddenly you feel like a great person.
I really want one of my friends of any gender to be like, rather than going, yeah, I got laid last night, I want them to go, yeah, so actually I have a friend that does this. Like he never goes, hey, so last night I fucking got laid. He's like, oh, so last night I had this awesome experience where I met this chick and we just had so much in common. And then we went back to my place and then we did this like thing I've never tried before. And it was really fucking cool. And she was like so cool about it. And I felt like we'd really gone on this journey together. Like those are the details, right? It's not just
Yeah.
about getting off. It's
Yeah.
about, oh, we tried something new together, or we just had this amazing connection, or whatever it was,
Yeah.
finding that stuff, right? And if you
Yeah.
can't find that stuff, if all you've got is I got off, we can do better.
Yeah, for sure. And anyone listening, if you go and like go on my forums and you can very quickly see who are the guys who've gotten to a point of like, and please don't take this as a disparaging comment, but you can tell the guys who've gotten to a point of like emotional maturity, or maybe you want to say like experience level or confident, whatever you want to call it, right? And to an advanced level where they've kind of moved past that, like, oh, I got another notch on my belt. And now they're like, oh, I met this girl and like she's like into this and she's like this and this. If you want more examples, go and listen to the last 5 times that Imogen and I talked about girls that we slept with. And if you listen to the way we say it, we say like, we met this girl, she was like super shy and cute, and then she did this, and then we went and hung out in this park and it was really cool. Then we took her back and she'd never kissed a girl. So like we kind of did this and this. You're talking more about the experience rather than just like, oh, we had a threesome. Now at the
Yeah.
start, that was how I
Right.
talked, because I was like, I just want to have a threesome. I just want to get laid. But once you kind of move past that, I feel like that's when this stuff becomes a lot more fun. And if you're listening and you're not there yet, you can kind of like, you can kind of make it happen by in the moment trying to keep an open mind and going like, it's almost like you're trying to remember the other details rather than just like, great, I can't wait to tell the guys that I got laid. You kind of say like, what kind of person is she? I like the way she moans. Hey, let's try this cool stuff. Or it's really hot when she tilts her head back. At like, you kind of make yourself remember those little details, because those are the details that you'll actually like later on, rather than just like, I got laid, I got another lay, yay. That isn't satisfying for very long.
Like you were saying earlier as well, it also helps you move from that kind of like scarcity mentality where you're like, oh my God, I need to fuck every chick I meet because who knows when the next one will come along. And you sort of move more to, so when I meet a new person and I'm kind of like, what are you going to bring to my experience? Like, are you worth hooking up with? Like,
Yeah.
what about you is going to work for me and work for both of us? And if there's nothing there, man, let's just part ways and I'll move on to the next person, because
Yeah.
I'm willing to wait. You want to wait
Yep.
for the good people, and you can't wait for the good people unless you're kind of like, assessing the vibe with each person and going, oh yeah, maybe we could get it on, but I kind of feel like the vibe isn't good enough.
Yeah, we call that in my community and pretty much everyone. They call it like screening. You're screening out the people that you don't click with, screening out the people you don't really like. I also use the term filtering, like you're filtering in the people that you do want to, have sex with, connect with, get laid, all that kind of stuff. And it is a process of that. And now at the start, fine. If you're a virgin, you're probably not going to be, I also call it fussy. You're probably not going to be as like fussy as someone else. You probably want to be a little more open-minded, get some experience, meet some new people. But even then,
You might
like,
not know what you like.
yeah, and fair enough at that point. But you're still being open-minded at that point. Like you're not just chasing a number. And I get that numbers have value. People would look at me and say, you're such a hypocrite, dude. Like, it's easy for you to say after you've had sex with like X number of women that like, oh, the number doesn't matter. That's easy for you to say. It does matter to me because I'm sitting here. What I would say is like, you will get there eventually. Like, if you have a certain goal, like let's say you want to have a bunch of sexual experiences with a bunch of different women, you'll get there eventually. You almost have to be more patient and remember that your goal was never to get to a certain number of lays. It was to have a certain number of experiences. And so each time you have those experiences,
Bucket
like
list.
make the most of them. Yeah, make the most of that shit. Don't just like, you don't go bucket list. I'm glad you brought that up. You don't just like rush through your bucket list and go tick, 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 tick. You're supposed to be enjoying it while you do it. And maybe I don't make that clear enough, but like, don't be trying all this sexual stuff and then just go, all right, so I tried the candle. She moaned. That was cool.
Done.
All right, okay, we tried ropes. Yeah, that was okay. Yeah, spanking. Okay. Like, enjoy it while you're doing it, please.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the whole point. The point is enjoying and what you learn from it and all the things, not just saying that you did it. It's not about getting that kind of like wings system that some bros have. Like you get your red wings, you get brown wings. And
no one needs to know what the red wings are. Or the brown wings. I have my red wings to be clear. I have all my wings probably.
But it's not about having the wings. It's about knowing what it's like to land a plane in a fucking snowstorm, right?
That's like the cheesiest thing you've said on the podcast, but I really like it.
Can I tell you something? And again, I can tell you this because my mother isn't listening. I do not know how many people I've slept with. I stopped counting about 6 or 7 years ago.
I have no
fucking idea.
This is like a point of emotional maturity that I want to get to. Like I've had this wrestling back and forwards. Now at this point, I can tell you roughly within like 30. And the longer this goes on, the further away from that, like being able to actually identify what the number is I get. And I think at some point I would just say like a lot of women. Like maybe I just say that.
I used to keep a list. I used to have a list of people in the back of my diary. It was very, very teenage with little asterisks for how much I liked them or
cute. I like that. I like that. I like that.
That got me to about 100. Once I started doing sex work, I fucking gave up. The way I'd have to work it out would be like, oh, I have about this many clients.
You'd have to average. That's what I have to do. That's what I've had to do. Yeah. Yeah. And so it's like roughly.
And, I'd love for everyone to have so much sex that they give up counting and just start focusing on the quality. And, maybe that's how we need to do it. Have sex until you forget the names of half the people you've had sex with. And then you'll arrive at that natural point where whether you have good sex is more important than another notch on your belt because numbers are no longer an issue.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Can I fire more questions at you? Sorry, Mom. She's not listening. She doesn't listen to my weird, nerdy podcast about sex.
I'll just not tell my mother about this one and then we'll be fine. I got like 10 more minutes and then I actually have to, I'm actually going out on a date shortly. So,
good job.
So, yeah, keep an eye on the time for me.
Okay. I have like a bunch more questions that I want to ask. I tell you what. If you're ever willing to come back at any point, I would love to ask. I wanted to ask you selfish questions about like content creation, podcasting, writing.
Oh my God, that's probably a bit off topic for your listeners, but we should totally have a chat about that.
No, they like that stuff. I got plenty of guys that talk about that stuff. But all right, last question. Let's do one last question, and then I'll let you go.
Right, hit me.
Has your line of work ever brought you into any real danger?
Yeah, so this is a sex work thing that people often bring up. Like I was talking to a journo a couple of years ago and he's like, oh, of course, sex work must be a really dangerous job and stuff. And I said, mate, like I've been attacked more by people I met on Tinder than people I met doing sex work. And he's like, oh, because I think he just assumed and I think a lot of people just assume that sex work goes hand in hand with being abused. Unfortunately, and this is the hard truth, dating is kind of dangerous if you're a chick. And it's
I don't disagree with that.
It's risky for guys in other ways. But in terms of getting assaulted and sexually assaulted, it's risky across the board. Sex worker, non-sex worker doesn't change. Meeting people you don't know can be a little iffy. And there are strategies that we have around that for safety and stuff. And I apply those strategies whether I'm dating someone or whether I'm seeing clients. If anything, I'd say I feel a little bit and this would be my experience and not everyone's, I feel a little bit more secure seeing clients because they've usually booked a hotel room. I've got their email address. I've got their phone number. If anything happens, I know that I can go to the cops. And because sex work isn't illegal in Victoria, although there's more to that story, but it means I can go to the cops and say, hey, this asshole did this to me, and they'll have his details. Whereas if I met someone on a Tinder date, they could just unmatch me afterwards.
They unmatch you and you're screwed, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's
in a
one
way,
big
there's
reason
almost
why I
more
get.
checks there.
That's one big
Sorry.
reason. That's one of the reasons why I get everybody's phone number before I meet them. And like, if they say let's stay on the app, that's a deal breaker for me. Like, no, no, thank you. Like,
That's
I'm
a
not
good way of
interested.
putting it, because I usually refuse to give people my number until I've met them in person, and I usually explain that to them. And if they don't accept that boundary, it's a deal breaker. But I never thought about the safety aspect. That's actually a really good point.
It's for me, it's not safety from my end. I'm not going to say like, oh, I'm worried about safety, because I'm not. For me, it's like, it makes it more real. It's more tangible. It's less like they're going to flake. It's less like I'm just some number on her out of, I'm one less
Right.
guy. When you're on Tinder, it's like you're just one of my Tinder matches. Whereas when it's a phone number, it's like you gave me your phone number. Like, you trusted me with this. Like, it's more real. And yeah, some women don't want to give you a phone number. And I just politely say like, no stress, that's a deal breaker for me. And then I'll unmatch. But most women are happy to give it. And I kind of like that. You have to be
So
comfortable
interesting.
giving your number though, obviously.
Which I'm really not. And I don't want to get bombarded at 3 a.m. with dick pics. So I always say no. So this is interesting, right? Because I can see what you're saying, and that it makes sense. And I can also see that my choice makes sense. And it may mean that we might never cross paths on dating apps, but I don't think there'd be anything wrong with that. Like, your preferences around this are valid and my preferences are valid. I think, yeah, that's a really good explanation for why you do that. I just, after being a sex worker for so many years, like, I just don't want another dick pic. So
no, and fair enough, because it's funny, because some guys will get annoyed when a girl doesn't give them her number, and I just say like, why do you care so much? Like, because like you're gonna, I wish we had this conversation earlier. Like, bombarded by dick pics. Like, that is a thing. Maybe we can end on that note. Like, how many dick pics have you gotten in your entire life, and then how many of them have been warranted? And I know you did a podcast with, was it Gabriel? Someone who's like the art of the dick pic.
The dick pic artist. Lovely.
Yeah.
The solicited dick pic is a wonderful thing. Unsolicited, no.
Guys, can I interject? Guys, I send nude pictures to literally every girl. So does Imogen, every girl that we meet up with. That's something I've done for the last 2 or 3 years. Now, how do I do that? When I ask for her number, I say like, you seem really cool. Let's grab a drink, see if we click. Give me your number. I'll send you some photos from some BDSM photo shoots we've done too, if you'd like. And pretty much every girl says, that sounds great. Then I get her number. I say, hey, what are you up to? Blah, blah, blah. Almost all of them say like, hey, can I have those pictures? There you go. And a couple of those pictures are me nude, but they look like tasteful. It's not just like my dick. It's like me naked in the mirror. Yeah. It's like artsy. So that's a decent way of doing it. You don't all have to be super artsy, fine. But, from your podcast, also, it's like, just put a bit of effort in.
Right. Also, a dick is a wonderful thing. Like, a picture of someone's dick that you're into, love it. A picture of someone that I don't know's dick, not so much, because the connection's not there yet. And obviously a dick that I haven't asked to see, I'm immediately like, you can go get in the bin now. So like, a solicited dick, even if it's just dick, filling up the whole screen, I love it. If it's someone I like. Yeah. So like, not to shame anyone's dick. Like, dicks are great. Dick pics are great, but solicited dick pics are great.
Yeah. And it can be a form of foreplay for sure. But if you just send it like out of nowhere, it's like socially uncalibrated. It's like you didn't understand you don't understand social etiquette and social rules, and it's like if you just take your pants off in the middle of the shopping center and squat down and pee. It's like, that's not appropriate. This isn't the place for it. Same as just sending a dick pic without like asking anyone. So it's more what it says about you. It says that like, you don't know basic social etiquette, rather than like, oh, I hate your dick.
Sometimes I feel like guys get to a certain level of horniness where suddenly something takes over and they're like, right, now's the time for a dick pic.
It does. You have no idea what it's like to be a guy.
And you've got a hard on, it's right there, right? But the things that guys find arousing are not the things I find arousing. Like, I'll say, hey, so what are you into? Have you done kink before? Let's have a chat about that. And I'm doing it because I want to get a feel for their experience and whether we're well matched. But to them, it's like this really full-on erotic foreplay. So they're getting super excited, and then they crank out the dick pic. And I'm like, why did you do that? We were just having a discussion about our interests.
I've had this conversation with so many guys where I say, like, if you're going to bring up kinks or like things that you're interested in, just have like a casual chat. And to be fair, some women do exactly what you're talking about, where they'll say like, tell me everything you want me to do to you. And I've made this point in so many podcasts and articles where I say, that's like, it's not a trap, but it's like, don't answer that. Don't then think that I should write like 7 paragraphs about all this explicit stuff, because that just ends up making her more nervous. You end up meeting significantly less people if you do that. Like, because then come the day of the date. Yeah. It's like
It's not
sexting.
cool to it's not cool to start sexting or getting into a sexy talk with someone without asking first. So like really she should be going, hey, I know we've just met, but do you mind if we start doing a bit of like sexy talk around the stuff I'm into? And if you're like, yeah, man, then she's like, so tell me what you want to do to me. Like, and there you go, you're off. But you have
It's
to
like
ask
socially
first.
uncalibrated again. That's the way I feel. Like whenever a girl does that, I don't hate it, but I do tend to unmatch because it's like it feels awkward. And now some
She's
guys will
forcing
listen
you
to
into
this.
a scene without pre-negotiation.
Now some guys will listen to this and be like, "That's hot. That's my kink." Sure, fine, like great. But like for me personally, I find that a bit awkward. Like it's socially
People who don't know how
uncalibrated.
to properly negotiate before involving me in something and not my kink.
Yeah,
Have you
yeah.
ever seen Creepy Asterisk on Reddit?
No, should I look this up after?
Yes, it's this
Okay,
whole
creepy
subreddit
asterisk.
of people messaging people, usually guys messaging girls, with the asterisk, that denotes action. And they're
Yeah.
like, slowly slides your panties off. And the chick's like, do I know you? It's
Oh,
pretty
these are
funny, but it's
amazing.
pretty
I'm just
bad.
on here now.
This is,
Holy crap.
check it out. It illustrates why you don't do that shit, why you don't start dirty talking without permission, because the reaction is horror.
Yeah. And I get why people do it. It's like a clumsy way of saying I'm into you, but it's easier to just say like, "Yo, I'm attracted to you. You're really attractive, or you're hot, you're
Yeah.
cute. Hey, what are you up to? Do you want to have a chat? Like, come, can I get your number? Let's go grab a drink."
Or
But
like,
just
hey, want a
saying,
dirty talk? If you want to go there, like, hey, loving this conversation. Do you mind if I start getting a bit sexy with you now? Because I'm feeling the sexy vibe. And then they can go, yeah or no. At least then you know.
or even just like, look at this big old dick. Do you want to see a big old dick?
Dick.
Dick incoming. What if you say like dick incoming in 3, 2,
2, 1, warn me.
question mark, dick, question mark. It's efficient.
You need a little app for that. Big John 21 has sent you a dick photo. Would you like to view it?
Yeah,
Yes,
you
no.
got to swipe.
Like,
You got to swipe on the people,
great
and if you
consent.
swipe yes, you get to see the dick. Yeah,
Twitter does that. Twitter will censor if someone that's not on my friends list sends me a picture and it looks like a dick. Twitter will blur it out. So just a message in case any of my Twitter
Bumble does
followers
that
come
too.
across this podcast. Don't send me dick pics. Twitter just blurs them, and I never click on them. So.
Send me dick pics if you want. You guys can send. I don't mind.
Send them to Andy. Send Andy
them all
dick
to me.
pics. If you're listening to this, are you on Twitter, Andy?
Fuck no.
Yeah, okay,
I'm not.
maybe you won't
I'd get censored
dick
in a
pics.
heartbeat. I wouldn't be okay on Twitter. Hell no, Twitter wouldn't like me. So if people don't want to send you dick pics, but they just want to check your stuff out, Art of the Hookup is your podcast. Do you have a particular episode that you want to send people to, like your best ever episode? If people want to just get a feel for what Georgie's all about.
Oh my god, I'm so torn because I have so much fun with everyone. I did one with a friend of mine on erections the other day that was pretty cool. She's a body worker, and we talked about like, not getting a hard on and what it means and why it's not a disaster. And in fact, I actually like guys that have a bit of trouble getting it up, so I explained why. That was kind of cool. I feel like for blokes that might be a good one because I feel like they just don't get to hear that very often. Like everyone's like, must have a hard dick, Yeah. It's kind of bullshit.
Yeah, I'll leave a link in the description below. I literally already left a link in my description because I thought you might say that one. And my favorite episode that I've heard so far of yours is the one that you did with, I can't remember her name, but it was about like your struggles with orgasming. And Imogen and I listened to that because she went through the same thing.
Useful.
And so maybe we can talk about this when we come on your podcast, but she used to take about an hour to orgasm with the big freaking Magic Wand vibrator. Now she's got it down to about like 2 or 3 minutes. Like,
oh, that's amazing.
And that was just practice.
I would love to hear about that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. It was super useful to me. And also I would add that if any of your folks didn't get their question answered, on my other website, the one about escorts, which is about escorts.info, I actually have an anonymous question box. So you can actually type your weird ass questions into the box there and it comes to me and then I write a blog on it. So if anyone's stuck on a sex worker question, or if anyone that listens to your show was too afraid to ask their question in the forum, there is a box there for that.
So that's about escorts.info, is that it?
.info.
Okay, I'm on there now. Yep. I'll leave a link to that as well.
You're fast.
So thank you I'm very fast, but hey, not in the bedroom. Thank you so much for coming on.
It's been awesome. Thank you so much for the chats. And I'm really looking forward to chatting to you and Imogen on Monday about picking up chicks. It's going to be great.
I promise, I cross my heart, I promise to be on my best behavior if your mother listens. So.
I wouldn't worry too much. You can handle it.